You good?
I'm good. Can you hear me good?
I can hear you great. I'm
You
stoked.
sound great.
Number
Yeah,
two.
I'm number two. It's here.
I'm excited. I'm excited. I felt really good about the first one but I think, even just now doing the second and knowing like, hey, let's really dig into something. Let's like really sink our teeth into this topic. Excites me. I'm excited. But anyways,
Yeah,
for everyone
agreed.
joining, sorry. Hello, welcome to Careers Unwrapped, episode number 2. Dennis, thanks for joining once again, my partner in
Yeah, yeah,
crime.
yeah.
We're excited. We today are going to be talking about if anyone tuned into the first podcast, you'll know that at Career Sandwich, there's our big mission. We want to empower people to build the career they crave. And there's 3 elements to that we believe. First is knowing yourself. Second is having the skills to develop and build your own path. And then third is staying organized along the way. Episode 2 of Careers Unwrapped today is all about knowing yourself and your personal and professional values. There's a reason we put that as the first of the 3 pillars. We think it's the foundation to everything. And we want to spend the next little bit digging into all of that. How do you know
Mm.
when your personal and professional values are aligned? What are the clues you can look for when they're feeling a little off base? All of that, all that good stuff. So I'm stoked.
Yeah, yeah. It should be good. I'm excited, like you said, to be able to now move past that. Hey, this is what we're doing. To now like diving deep into these topics, and this is one of those that it should go pretty well in terms of like where we're gonna go. I have a feeling so because we all have very different versions of what um what it feels like when aligned and not aligned. So it should be good.
Totally, totally. Well, I mean, maybe we start at the very high level, when we thought about knowing yourself, it's not often something that you see in professional literature out in the world, oh, tell me who you really are. That it seems like the conversation is usually focused on tell me what you've done, not tell me who you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key part of why our philosophy is a bit different and a little bit more in line with how people actually live and operate in today's day and age.
Mhm.
Um, so, I mean, I'd love to sort of hear your personal take when you hear the phrase professional values and personal values. What do values really mean to you? What part do they play in your life? Kind of very high
Yeah.
level, but I think it'd be a fun
Y-
place to start the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, you hit on something that I think is very like important. And I think cornerstone to a lot of this is, I always think of like, how do you show up at a networking event? And, I think gone are the days of, well, we should be rethinking this. What do you do versus like, who are you? Right. Because what we do, who we are very different. Right. And it's weird to think for many many years and generations that's kind of how like what you do is who you are, and it's not that. And I think that that reflection in on your values, and those values I think start, obviously really early on in your life, right? Like what are the things you care about, what are the things you were taught, what are your beliefs from home, some of which as you grow you look at and you go, well, I don't quite believe in that now. I did then, but it's changed. And I think as we open our worlds to different perspectives, our values kind of shift. And I think we're all probably over the last 5, 6 years, looking at a lot of things differently, like what does matter. So for me, I think like most, I kind of my family, defined a set of values in me. My parents hardworking. Neither of them went to college, but they grew well. Like they grew in their careers as you typically would see, right? Like
Mhm.
stayed there from start to retirement, did all the things that you would do in a traditional, ladder type approach. But in that, you see, what it means to work hard, right? What it means to take risk and believe in yourself and take an opportunity, open a door, right? I think those beliefs are still true to me as, with as you kind of continue to progress along. I think finding go through the door, I mean, and I think that's one that out of a lot of the values, I think in my career, it's take that shot, like shoot your shot, but as you go through that door, you also have to know who you are in order to know if it's not a right fit, and I think that comes back to, we'll talk more about this, but like, how do you assess that? Like, how do you get down into the roots of it? So a lot of my, to sum that up, a lot of my values are rooted in, you know, good family values, I think, in one way. Like I kind of care how work and life blend together. Obviously want to support my family and what that means. And gone are the days where I feel like I need to give everything to X company, right? Because they can only be so loyal at the end of the day, and it's not their fault, right? And I mean that loyalty is it's a big thing that they have to take care of, and they're not thinking about me as much as I may think of that in that moment. So I got to watch out for myself and my family first and foremost. So
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, there's so many bits of that that
yeah,
I could hop on. And I totally agree with all of that. I posted something on LinkedIn recently and I just said, friendly reminder that companies are inanimate objects, right? They
mm,
are inherently not capable of possessing feelings or taking care of someone. And that's not to say that there aren't companies that have really great leaders who do their damnedest to try to do the right thing, like day in and day out.
yeah,
And yes, there are some of those, but we've seen it time and time again that the pressures of like these companies' values,
yeah,
oftentimes growth at all costs, profitability over anything, like, these other values that get taken on by this inanimate object often means that, people lose out. And so I think
mhm,
now more than ever in 2024, really getting people to look inward and figure out, okay,
mhm,
what really matters to me? And like, how do I advocate for that for myself? Because, you know, the hard truth is like, we just can't bank on someone else advocating for those
yeah,
things for us.
yeah,
It's just not the
and,
world we're living in
and
today. And again, that's not a knock on anybody. It's just
yeah,
here's where we're at. Like, okay, so how do we navigate it in a way that is most effective
yeah.
and gets you where you want to be?
Yeah, and I think maturity, like when I think of the folks who, and I don't think anybody has it figured out, right? Like, I mean, no matter where you are in a company, that's one of the things I've learned is everybody's still learning, everybody's still trying to like figure things out in life. And but the sign of maturity, I think, is, early on in my career, my currency was just work as hard as I could, show
Mhm.
everybody that I'm a dependable, reliable, teammate, right? Like that was kind of like and oh, I was talented enough to do the job. I should be here. But as you kind of build up your credit, right, or your bank of skills, expertise, you start to kind of like look at things with a different lens of maturity, right? And I think, when you reach that point, I think that maturity is important to say like, I don't need to give up that thing in exchange, or I don't need to absorb those values as mine, as the company's values may not necessarily align to mine. And
Mhm.
I think, you know, we're getting better at trying to ask those questions in interviews, to figure out like, hey, is this the place for me? But I think we have a lot of work to do to separate still like what I believe as an individual I need, what this company is doing, and like, am I truly going to be a fit for this place versus I just need a job.
Mhm. Totally.
So
And I think so much of that comes down to confidence and believing in yourself. That's one of the number one things that I hear from folks when we talk about this notion of what does it mean to know yourself? What really matters to you? How do you stand up for that? And
mhm,
there's a whole bunch of reasons why, you know, we want people to get better at that, but I think, at least from where I sit, the number one theme I see about what's preventing someone from getting there is believing their own experience. Um,
mhm, Mhm.
Dr. Becky, I can't remember if I've told you this, like shared that really compelling example a while back on her own social media about a time when she was in school. She went to Duke, she's in class, she's in some lecture, the professor's rambling on about whatever, and Dr. Becky is like, what on earth is this person talking about? I don't like
Mm.
I literally don't know what they're talking about, but no one else was raising their hand. No one
Mm.
else was saying, oh, I'm confused. And so Dr. Becky doubted her own experience of being confused and decided not to advocate for herself and that she didn't raise her hand. But then a few seats down, a woman did raise her hand
Mm.
and say, hey, I'm sorry if I missed something or if, everyone else is on the same page, but respectfully, like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And usually I do
Mhm.
know what you're talking about. And so
Mhm.
something's not right here. And the way that Dr. Becky talks about that moment was that is just an exceptional example of confidence and believing yourself. Like, this is what I
Mm.
feel, this is what I'm experiencing. I'm going to ask for what I need in that moment. And that level of confidence is what we're striving for here when we
Mhm.
say,
Mhm.
what does it mean to really know yourself? Because
Yeah.
when we get into the realm of values, this isn't a binary black and white, right? Different things matter to different people, and that
Yes.
is okay. And
Yeah.
so that's where it can get a little funny and easy to lose your footing, I think, when you don't have something factual or
Mhm.
tangible to point back to. And it really is just rooted in your internal compass.
Yeah.
That's just not something that a lot of us have super well calibrated. It's not a
Yeah.
tool that we're really, really comfortable yet using. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how I think about values, both personal and professional, as it relates to like building a career you crave. Like we got to learn that tool of our internal
Yeah.
compass.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think a lot of times the more you can talk to people close to you that you trust, or just kind of work through this. I often will have coffee with my peers and people that I feel are, like, "Oh, you're doing well in life. You still you feel that you hear that doubt, and you
Mhm.
get to this place in that conversation, and I'm sure you've been there too, Shelby, where you're just like, wow, there's so much doubt, like whether like
Mhm.
maybe, and maybe that's not the thing you should be doing. And like when you have that person that you can kind of talk this stuff through and riff around, you start to realize like, yeah, maybe I need to get truer to myself, or like redefine what I'm trying to get out of this versus just sitting here doing what I've been doing because it's working. And this idea of comfort, right? It's fascinating when you start to get past the what do you do versus like who are you? It's it is really also it's really interesting to go to a networking event and ask that question. So, oh, what do you do versus, or who are you versus what do you do? I mean, there's almost like this blank stare because it not a lot of people know what that is,
Mhm.
and it changes a lot too when you ask that question because I think it depends on where you're at or at any given time. So, but I think revisiting that, getting clear on that, I think is critical to all the things you can start to build off of in terms of your life. And, it's what I talk about a lot is just designing that stuff with intention. But if you don't know where you're going, you don't know who you are, it's hard to make the steps in
Mhm.
the direction you want to take. So, yeah.
Have you ever been at a place in your career where I'm assuming you didn't intentionally get there, but you end up in a place and something triggers you or makes you realize, oh, whoa, this is not aligned. Like this is not working
Oh,
for me. Like, what were those internal clues that kind of
yeah.
started ringing your alarms that something was off?
Yeah, and I'll start by saying I think for everyone it's different, right? I
Yeah.
think depending on what your intuitions are, or the things that kind of stick in your side. I think everybody has those. So
Mhm.
for me, I mean, the one company I work for, I do literally on day one, I was like, this isn't right.
Oh shit, really?
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was because of I am such a empathetic, culture driven person in my work. I love bringing people together, and I love like I could tell real quickly that the place that I signed up for to do the things I wanted to do and things I dreamed about and just what it felt like to create this inclusive space for everybody to thrive in just wasn't there.
Mm,
It frankly, it like freaked me out. I'm like, what did I do? And but I'm also not one to just quit, right? I look at it
yeah.
as, okay, what's the challenge in front of me? But I knew relatively quickly, like just by the sense in the room, that this wasn't going to be the place where I was going to jive, from a career and fulfillment perspective on a day to day, right? So that's a biggest view. The other, I have a lot of those indicators. Like I need to see a lot of visibility for me to feel like I can be connected to the thing I'm working on. Like if I'm just a person in the machine, that just doesn't work for me. Like it's just not a place I can occupy. Um,
Mm,
so I think as things start to move in that direction, I start to know like, okay, time for me to, if I'm just taking orders, not having that space to, have strategic conversations with folks to move the business, because I very much believe that everybody has a position in there to do that.
mm,
I start to I start to check out a little bit and know that I need to start revisiting it. Plus, and it's also manage like relationships. When you start going into those calls and you're just like this starting to feel like work. I know that's like a super cliche thing to say, but when you start dreading that Monday,
yeah.
it's time. Like it's just it's hard to build back that joy when you are slowly just getting it. And then again, it's no fault to because companies are like you mentioned, they're amoebas. Like they're always taking shape, and different people are coming in to influence different things. The customers, the business, like all this stuff's happening. So at any given moment, that company's going to feel slightly different. But if those waves start to feel drastic for me, I start to get nervous and just like I know I'm not going to be able to make this work. Like I'm just going to be more angry and frustrated than finding joy. And to me, it's not worth that. I'd rather spend the energy to go and find a place that, I can thrive in. And for me, thriving is, moving projects along in a way that everybody feels a sense of like unity and excitement and joy and cultivating I mean, really all the stuff we're doing here at Career Sandwich. So this is why I'm doing Career Sandwich.
Mhm.
It's where I feel like I can make the most impact on the world, right? So
Yeah.
um, I'd say those are a lot of those indicators for me. Is it's usually at the business level more than it is at the day to day, like you know,
Yeah.
where I get weird.
What I love about that is that I've had a lot of coaching calls in the last couple of weeks and months where there are folks who are saying the 180 opposite of what you just said. They're
Oh,
like,
interesting.
yeah, they're like, I just want to be, I've done the all in thing. I've done the, huge sphere of
Oh,
influence.
jeez.
Hello.
Hello, special guest. Uh, I'm recording a podcast. Yay. All right. You are now, but I'll chat with you in a little bit, okay? Okay.
Um,
Okay. Bye-bye. See ya.
real
Oh,
life, real life. Love it.
real life. Yeah, we're living in it.
Love to see. No, but all to say that, there's plenty of people who are saying the opposite. Like, look, like I've got enough going on in my personal life. That's a huge part of like where my cognitive load goes. Like I want to just simplify my professional life and I kind of just want to come in and do my job and keep it simple and, not expect too much from the company and not have them like expect me to do a bunch of, Herculean efforts. And so to your earlier point, like it really does look different for everybody. And
Mhm,
that's
mhm.
essential for the world to go round,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
if we all wanted to know everything, if we all wanted to be massive culture shapers, if we all wanted to do the same things, then we would just constantly be at odds. And I think the I think that's what's just so freaking fascinating about people is literally yesterday I was having this conversation with someone who was saying the exact opposite of what you need was what he needed. And
Mm,
then I was chatting with
yeah.
someone else who was saying they feel complete, it was low key heartbreaking, but saying that they're full of apathy right now. Like I
Mm,
don't even know. And that
mhm,
to me is like another variety of what's at stake if you don't know yourself and you don't know your values, right? I would kind of argue that to your experience, like being frustrated or angry or ticked off if you're not getting brought along or something like that is almost better than being totally apathetic because to feel in essence nothing means that
yeah.
you don't have any sense of what really matters to you.
Yeah.
It feels like a void,
D-
and that's the worst case scenario, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel because I've often struggled with this too, right? Is as people kind of define and get better at like what, and I'm gonna make an assumption. I'm just gonna throw it out in the room here, but I feel like oftentimes you start your career, you're on this path, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna keep growing and go into management. I'm gonna keep going into this direction of like, bigger is better, right? Um, do you feel like the reason why people struggle with getting clear on who they are could be the fact that businesses tend to only reward folks who are continuing to go,
Mhm.
I guess lean forward. But like to your point, it takes like some of the most talented and most valuable people on the teams that I've worked for were the people who were just like, this is all I want to do.
Mhm.
Like I am super good at doing this thing. No disrespect, like I'm good. Like from a management perspective, they're a joy, because like they're gonna show up, they're gonna do the thing. Um, you, but I wonder if like because like I feel like the incentive system doesn't reward that, right? Of just like, okay, I know who I am enough to say like this is enough for me
Yeah.
in my career right now, and it could be seasonally. Like I don't need any more stress. I've got this going on in my life. This is all I can take
Yeah.
versus like the person in whose proximity is to the decision maker, and they're just kind of like, how much do you think that plays into someone's
Oh,
lack of being able to truly define like and be comfortable and confident in who they are, is they
my
think they're going to
gosh.
get penalized for it?
Oh, it is. I mean, I'm sure if we spent 20 minutes scouring the internet, we could find thousands of examples that validate that
Mhm.
point. I mean,
Yeah,
the reverse of it that I think is true. Remember when Zappos did the whole pay people to quit
yeah,
thing? You
yeah,
know, right? They turned that narrative on its head and it worked. Like
yeah,
people who
yeah.
immediately felt like, "Ooh, yeah, not quite right." Like
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
gonna step away, no hard feelings,
Mm.
and
Yeah,
it's about incentive structures. Um,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and that's hard because that stuff's real, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm. Yeah,
if you and
yeah,
it's not like it's easy to exist in the world today, things are
yeah.
expensive, like life is expensive,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
it's all the things. And so the huge majority of us don't have the privilege to just say, like, that doesn't vibe for me, so I'm not going to do it. Right? Like there's
Yeah,
more
yeah.
consideration sets than that. And so I think that's another part of this conversation and what makes it so hard to get people to really buy into this idea of you've got to know yourself because with so many other demands on people's time and
Mhm.
energy in their lives, this intangible
Mhm.
one often gets like pushed down the priority
Yeah,
list.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, it reminds me a little bit about the same. It's like whenever you're building a business or whatever. I remember shifting at one point. a client base, right? And you end up having to say no more than yes to get to that place you want to get to. And to your point, when you don't have, if you don't have the ability to be able to say no more than X amount of times, you eventually just gonna give up on that and just I'm just gonna take it, right? And then it feels like you're going back into the like the same cycle. So, I am curious, for somebody like if we look at if somebody who's watching this podcast, listening to this podcast, like, and they're sitting in a place right now where they're like, okay, my story or my knowing myself is important, right? Okay, I get it. Like, in order for me to negotiate the pay that I want, in order for me to find the job that I really want, in order for me to reach this place where I'm starting to build a career in the life that I crave, where do I start?
Mhm.
Like I'm sitting here right now. Maybe I just
Mhm.
got unemployed. I just went through a restructure, or I'm transitioning out of a company, or I'm sitting here wondering if I should leave, but I don't want to because the market's very weird. Um, where do you start? Like, what's the simplest thing that they can do today to start putting them on that kind of like tweaking path of iterating to like to getting to that place of who are they
Yeah.
at its core?
Well,
Sorry.
as no, 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 no. Like it's a question I get all the time. And I will caveat this with there's probably 10% of people who are in some sort of situation where they know they need a change and if the circumstances of that situation are extreme enough, whether it's extreme workplace toxicity or like
Mm,
if they're just if their mental state is like deeply 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 affected by whatever they're experiencing at work, there are some situations where I think my answer to that question would be you need to make a drastic change right now because you're not going to be able to get regulated again to
mhm,
actually get where you want to be if you remain in this environment. And that's terrifying. I get it.
mhm,
But there's a ton of resources out in the world that can help you through a big moment like that.
mhm.
I'm not suggesting that the masses just like up and quit their jobs tomorrow in the spirit of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
knowing yourself. That's not what I think is
Yep.
the right answer long term. But I will say that if you're in a situation that's like really, really bad to the point that you're experiencing anxiety, like anything like that, I think a larger scale change more quickly actually creates space for you to
Mhm.
make the longer term change.
Yeah.
In most other cases, iterative adjustments does work, I think,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
really, again, like kind of follows those three pillars in order. So, that first getting really crisp on knowing yourself, and it sounds overly simplistic, but there's so much science that shows the value of these things. Something as simple as self-reflection, you know,
mhm.
like truly, when I talk to folks who are not happy in their world and I ask them, well, when's the last time you sat down for 5 minutes and like really thought about it? Not just
Yeah.
not just reactively panicked about it or got anxious about it or anything, but thought about it
Mhm.
intentionally. And the huge majority of folks are like, I don't have time to eat lunch, let
Yeah,
alone,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so I'd say off the cuff, like step one in most cases is reminding yourself that you matter and
Mhm, mhm.
carving out the small space. The action that you take in that space is going to look different as time goes on and depending on what situation you're in, but
Yeah,
you can't take the actions if you don't have the space. So
yeah,
you
yeah.
have to commit to yourself. Like
Mhm.
maybe that's the clean way
Yeah,
to say it. Like that's step one. Like I
yeah,
matter
yeah. I
and I'm
think,
going
yeah,
to do this for myself.
yeah. I mean, I think you're spot on. I mean, I think, we are in a very complex world, like you said. There's so many different inputs. We're dealing with, families. We're dealing with. There's a lot, and the the fact is most people probably are not taking that space to
Mm.
open up, reflect, you know, end of day whatever your jam is, to sort of be in yourself and in your thoughts. I love how you called it like not panic thinking. It's like literally like this space is for me to proactively like start to
Yeah.
think through like what do I need to get out of this. And you mentioned, different levels of change. I know we have a really cool module and exercise to help people kind of work through and assess like this is a small change, here's some things you can do versus big change. You mentioned like really big things that may be affecting somebody. We have some really awesome partnerships where you can get 3 months of you know support through a company called BetterHelp, just by being a member of Career Sandwich, just to do those things, right? Like, in order before you can even think about what matters to your career, you almost have to get the head on straight, to then be able to say, okay, now that my head's straight and these things are kind of over here, I can now start to like break down what matters to me from a financial perspective, from a work life balance perspective, whatever that is. You're not going to be able to do it if you're in the fog, right? And that is
Yeah.
this is one of the things. I mean, I could go for hours here, show, but this is one of the things that I often cringe. I'm like, this idea of like sabbaticals, right? It's like it's like 5, 10 years before someone can get a sabbatical. I'm like, why does it have to be so far out? And I know why, right? It's just that's another one of the tools that kind of keep you hanging in. But on the other hand, it's like if you give people that space every like periodically, it really makes me wonder, would people, hang in a company a little bit longer because they have that month or 2 months to sort of like regather what matters to them. And how many high performers are leaving a company proactively because they're just not given the time to do it. It's like give a sabbatical earlier to some folks and you'd be amazed what they could probably come out with and how they could perform and grow your business versus like being disgruntled, frustrated, exhausted, and tired
Mm.
and peace out because that's the quick reaction to solve the problem.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's something I've often thought about. um how do you bake in that space of reflection inside somebody's
Mhm.
time at a company,
Yeah.
almost like a perk, right? It should be a
Yeah.
true opportunity. I mean,
Yeah.
we get it, I guess, under the spirit of performance evaluations and stuff like that. It's like reflect on your last but is that truly what we're asking for here? Probably not.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know, I'm trying to think of like an interesting analogy in my head. I love a good analogy, but
Yep.
you know, think about specific, like imagine you want to be a chef and you're, in some other job right now and you have this hunch that you want to move into the restaurant world and you want to be a chef and I it's not enough to just say, okay, carve out 10 minutes a day and like think about how you want to be a chef. Like, no, you need to practice. So you need spatulas and you need knives and you need fresh produce and you need, people to try the recipes that you're making. Like
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
it's, and I think that's what we're trying to, not, I know that's what we're trying to build
Yeah,
with Career Sandwich is
yeah.
the suite of tools that you can use to figure out if you want to go down that path, right? And that's what and a
Yeah.
really important differentiator that I think I want to make clear to folks, like we are not sitting here saying like, oh, just go pontificate for 10 minutes and like have a
Yeah, yeah,
blast, you'll be
yeah.
fine. That's not true.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
You need the action, like, yeah, you need the 10 minutes and also you need tools to help you guide those 10 minutes, like the change exercise that
Mm-hmm,
we've got to your
mm-hmm.
point. It's a perfect
Yeah.
example. 15, 20 questions that we ask, you rate where you fall on the scale for each of those things, and it spits out an answer like, ooh, based on what you just told us, like you probably need like a big change at this point, or like, oh, you're probably like generally doing okay. So here's some small tweaks that you can consider making.
Yeah.
we don't expect and we shouldn't expect people to just naturally have all that stuff like in their own mind space, right? We provide tools in every
Mm.
other aspect of life. Why don't we do it with people's careers?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think,
Do now. We're
and
we're building it, but
yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I also, to add to what you were saying, because I think it's important, is we're also not saying you do this once and then you're done.
totally.
I think that's something that's taught early on. It's like you build your resume, you did your thing, you got your first interview, you got your first job, and now you're done.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you got the paper to graduate, whatever your path to getting into the industry is, or whatever industry you're in. Like you're just like a chef. You're constantly trying different recipes. You're constantly going out and finding different people who to taste those things. You're constantly reinventing around different ingredient. I mean, it's a constant exercise to stay fresh, right? And stay true to the thing that matters to you, or the things that matter to you. And depending on the season, not to keep on the chef analogy, you're going to use different ingredients
Yeah,
because
totally.
that's what's in season. It's always going to taste better, right?
Totally.
So don't expect this work to, like you said, and I think it's really important to stress, is that we are trying not to build career sandwich and the ecosystem around career sandwich to be this, fairy tale mindset that like you just
Totally.
do this thing and it'll come. Like this is, if you've had a chance to chat with either of us, I think folks who have, my hope is they come out of this realizing that we're authentic, we're going to be as real as we can be. It's their problems to kind of work through and solve, and we're going to be there to help guide, and we have the tools and the things to guide them. But we're not, this isn't something that's going to get solved in 2 days, right? Like this is, your career is something you're working on, you're iterating on, depending on where you are in your career. It's very similar to like a financial plan, right? Like you revisit it every quarter, you revisit it every couple of years, you start to throw other things into it, like two dogs or two kids, whatever it is, it's going to impact that plan a little bit. And I think that's important, and I think that's okay.
Mhm.
But if you know who you are, you know kind of where you're going, you'll be able to kind of stay course and kind of navigate around those things and like strategically insert those into your path. And I think that's the art of like, when do you know you've gotten there? And if I don't know if you ever get there, but when you feel more comfortable and empowered is when you can keep kind of course, and these things can kind of come in,
Mm.
intercept and shoot across your path, but you know that you can grab one, you can push one aside, but it just feels like things are kind of chugging along. It's making sense. You're building onto your resume in a way that just, you're not giving away things to gain. Like it's all just kind of chugging along smoothly, and you feel empowered, truthfully, to do the best work of your life, whatever that looks like for you. So,
I mean, I think that's a beautiful like bow on this conversation. But I think like, yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, so I don't think I'll try.
oh gosh. Oh, all right then. that works.
Uh, I
Hmm.
really appreciate us sitting down again and digging into this.
Yeah, yeah,
I think we have a lot of work to do to your point, kind of debunk a lot of stories and myths that we've
yeah,
told ourselves and heard over the course of our careers, that
yeah,
these things sort of that there's an end or there's a final destination, or that, you do
mhm,
this and it's one and done.
yeah,
Or that people, or even more so that you're supposed to just know and you're supposed to just
that,
figure
yeah,
it out. And
yeah,
it's just, it doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel like anybody's winning with that strategy. And so I'm really excited for Career Sandwich to be a place where we can debunk those things
yeah,
and say,
yeah,
no, this actually is not obvious. It's not, no one's taught us how to do this, right? So
yeah, yeah,
here's tools and resources and scripts and programs and all sorts of things that you can use to get closer to where you want to
yeah,
be, and do it in a way that feels authentic and feels in line
mhm,
to that internal compass that we talked about earlier, because
yeah,
that's when people feel good and most at home in themselves, which is
Yeah.
all I ever really want.
Yeah.
Someone.
Yeah. They can live their truth. And yeah, it's if more people could get to that place, I think it solves a lot of things that we're all dealing
Everything.
with as a
Everything.
world in the world. Yeah. So for sure. I love it. I think we could probably break down each of those things. I'm thinking of like the individual, maybe this is a future thing we do as we bring in some questions, but I know there's folks that I've talked to who are like, I'm stuck doing this thing because that's all I've ever known because my
Mhm.
family did it, or it's just like part of, who we are as a generational family. Like I'm doing this job. I want to do something different, but I don't know if that's going to disappoint my family. Like there's so many reasons why people do what they do and why they're doing it. I think it'd be really interesting in one of these future episodes to start bringing in some folks who may have like shifted their mold and like,
Mm.
and hear this from other folks in careers who've really stood up for what they believe in. And I'm sure there's a lot more there that we could unpack for sure.
Oh, there's
So
so much. It's not as easy as
yeah.
just standing up, but that's what makes the stories really interesting.
Nice. That is true.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Cool. Well, thank you, Shelby.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. And thanks
Yeah.
everyone for listening in. We'll be back next week with episode
Yeah.
3.
Awesome. Cool. See you
Yeah.
then. Bye.